Oh, look who's still alive. Buckle up, because today we're breaking down an anime about a guy getting a second chance at failing upward. Smash that like button and drop a comment so the algorithm actually pretends this video exists. Help a brother out. Everyone thinks our lead is a total loser with zero magic, but surprise, he's actually the deadliest exorcist alive. Back in the day, Horoyoshi was the undisputed king of exorcists in Japan. He basically spent his free time turning terrifying demons into his personal interns, using some high-level spiritual voodoo. With his squad of supernatural thugs, he was basically untouchable. But the government got nervous because he was too op, so they kidnapped his students. And just like that, the world's strongest exorcist got jumped in a rigged fight. As he lay there dying, he realized he spent his life chasing clout only to get played by a bunch of corrupt politicians. He decides it's time for a hard reset. Since the Ice Guy truck hadn't been invented yet, he had to get creative. He ends his own subscription to life, using a reincarnation spell to find a better body. He wakes up in a world of magic as Seika, the third son of a noble family that prides itself on being magic snobs. He thinks he's his dad's kid, but he's actually the secret son of a dead uncle. It's basically a magical soap opera. Only his fake dad, Robert, knows the truth, and he's keeping Seika completely in the dark about his lineage. When Seika hits 5, Robert checks his stats and realizes he's a magical pauper with 0 mana in a world where magic is your entire personality and bank account. He might have 0 mana, but he's totally unbothered. He's still packing that massive spiritual energy from his previous life, which is basically a cheat code. One day he turns some leaves into rats and crows just to see if his old tricks still work. Suddenly, his big brother Gray shows up. He's your classic peaked in high school bully. Just as he's about to swing on Seika, the crows attack him until their other brother, Luft, shows up to save the day. Luft is suspicious because the birds left Seika alone, but he decides to mind his own business for now. As time passes, Seika stays busy making DIY paper dolls, which are the bread and butter of his dark arts. His only real fan is the maid, Ifa, who always finds a reason to hang around his room. Gray is still a jerk, constantly flexing his magic and calling Seika a magical hobo because he's original like that. He brags about getting into the fancy magic academy, but Robert drags both of them off to a training session. Seika decides to tag along. The brothers start blasting rocks with wind and fire, and Gray dares Seika to try, mostly so he can laugh when nothing happens in front of their dad. Seika doesn't want the spotlight, but he's also tired of being the family doormat. He borrows Gray's wand, uses his secret spirit stash, and nukes a rock with a blue fireball that leaves everyone speechless. His dad copes by saying some people just have weird fire colors, but he still won't let Seika learn real magic. Instead, Robert hires a tutor for general studies, thinking Seika should at least learn how to read. Seika leans into it, using the time to study the world while his paper spies keep tabs on his brother's training. Fast forward to age 11, Seika decides to summon one of the demons he used to keep in his basement in his past life. Since he threw them into a different dimension, he's pretty sure he can just pull them through the portal. He starts small by summoning Yuki, a mystical white fox who's supposedly the least scary of the bunch. Ifa thinks he's amazing, but he points out that she's the weird one for being able to see animal souls. She pops out in human form. She immediately gets clingy, but he's skeptical because she looks way different than he remembers her. It turns out her powers were nerfed in this world, turning the former bombshell into a pint-sized girl. Seika considers sending her back because he's really not into the whole tiny girl aesthetic. He tells her this was just a trial run, but she's bored of her dimension and refuses to leave. She turns into a pet fox just so she can stay by his side. Later, Seika catches Gray trying to be a creep with Ifa and steps in to remind him that she's his servant. Gray tries to throw a punch, but Seika blocks it like it's nothing, making him look like a clown. Ifa takes him to help a hurt monster cub she found in the woods, hoping he can work some magic. Seika tells her to look away because he needs to concentrate, but really he's just hiding his methods. He uses his spirit arts to heal the little guy in record time. She's shocked he knows, and finally spills the beans on her own secret ability. She can see elemental spirits floating around. Apparently, these spirits love Seika's stuff, but avoid him like he's a guy handing out flyers at the mall. Seika realizes she's a natural spirit whisperer and starts cooking up a plan to recruit her. He offers to teach her magic, and when she says she's too weak, he tells her they're going to use the backdoor method. He spawns a fire spirit and tells her to make it go away, which takes her a minute to figure out. She finally orders it to vanish, and Seika realizes he's found a top-tier sidekick. He spends the next few months turning her into a spirit-controlling powerhouse. Seika hits 12, but his dad is too busy to even show up for his birthday dinner. His brothers tell him he should practice sword fighting, since his only career path is being a meat shield for the army. Basically, he has no future as a lord or a mage. Suddenly, everyone panics because a massive monster is stomping toward the mansion. Seika notices it way before the alarms go off. When the giant salamander shows up, Gray literally wets himself and bolts. Luft tries to play hero and tells everyone to hide. He's shaking in his boots, but Seika ignores him and heads straight for the beast that's eyeing Ifa for lunch. Before he can even step in, Ifa accidentally nukes it with a fire spirit, which actually impresses him. He finishes the job by leading the monster away and deleting it with some high-tier poison. The crowd goes wild and Seika plays it cool. Everything is going exactly as he planned. Robert finally shows up and buys him a fancy dinner to celebrate. He asks Seika what he wants for his birthday, and Seika demands a spot at the Magic Academy, much to Gray's visible frustration. His dad agrees to let him take the entrance exam. But Seika isn't done. He wants to bring Ifa along as his +1. Robert says no because she's talentless, so Seika drags her to the window and tells her to blow up the yard with the biggest fireball she can muster. He tells her if she fails this, she's staying behind. No pressure, right? Ifa doesn't want to be left behind, so she channels her inner arsonist and throws a massive fireball that stuns the family. Robert folds and says she can go. Then he looks at Gray and tells him he's going to the army instead. Gray is absolutely fuming at the news. He challenges Seika to a duel, thinking he can win back his spot at the academy. Seika accepts. Robert sets the time for noon tomorrow and reminds them not to actually kill each other. That night, Luft stops by to give Seika an expensive pen and some overdue brotherly affection. He admits he's been a pretty crappy brother and feels guilty. He wants to make things right before they head off to school. Luft begs Seika not to destroy Gray in the duel, and Seika gives him his word. But Gray is too impatient for noon and blasts Seika's window with wind magic to start the fight early. Seika goes down to meet him. Gray screams about how the monster kill was just a fluke and he's the real mage. Gray tries a fire tornado, but Seika just stands there like he's waiting for a bus. Gray keeps spamming spells, but Seika just blocks them all before using a paper doll to wrap him up like a Christmas present. He uses a paralysis spell and starts twisting Gray's arm until the bully begs for mercy through the pain. As Gray passes out, Seika leans in and whispers that the monster fight wasn't luck at all. He actually set the whole thing up months ago, using a demon to lure the salamander to the house for his own benefit. He'd already studied the beast's weak points. It was all just a staged performance for his dad. Yuki asks him why he's being so low-key when he could basically rule the world. He tells her that being famous in his last life got him killed, so this time he's sticking to the shadows. Spring rolls around and Seika is traveling with Ifa, but he realizes his new body is prone to motion sickness. By the time they hit the inn, he's a total mess, and Ifa has to play nurse. She's clearly trying to make a move and suggests they share a bed for the night. But Seika is legally blind to flirting and completely misses the hint. They finally reach the academy for the test, where the proctor tells them to touch a crystal to prove they aren't magicless bums. Ifa turns out to be a natural at fire and wind magic, but Seika looks like a total charity case in front of everyone. He's got 0 mana, and the other students are already whispering that he only got in because his dad's check cleared. A girl with 0 patience finally snaps and tells everyone to shut their mouths while she talks to the examiner. Seika recognizes her immediately. This is Emmy, a commoner who somehow has a massive talent for all 4 elements, which is basically a statistical anomaly. After watching her, Seika realizes she's a dead ringer for his favorite student from his past life. Talk about a weird coincidence. Seika breezes through the written exam, and then it's finally time for the practical portion where they actually get to break stuff. The students are supposed to blast stone targets with their best spells to prove they aren't completely useless. Seika notices most of these losers can only handle 1 element. It's honestly depressing how low the bar is at this school. When it's Ifa's turn, she absolutely shreds the targets with fire and wind. Seika is actually shocked at how much she's improved while he wasn't looking. Seeing her level up like that almost brings a tear to his cynical eye. Then it's his turn. He uses a blue fire doll to torch the first target before casually deleting the second one from existence. He finishes by deep freezing the third target with ice magic and acts like it was a struggle. Everyone is losing their minds that a kid with no magic just pulled that off. However, Emmy completely overshadows him by flexing all 4 basic elements plus light and dark magic. She's basically a walking cheat code. The results drop the next day. Ifa was worried she'd fail, but she actually took second place, even beating Seika, who landed in third. Emmy takes the top spot and Seika marks her as his next target. He wants her on his team whether she likes it or not. On day 1 of school, Seika's internal alarm starts ringing. Something definitely feels off about the vibe here. He asks Ifa if she senses anything weird, and she confirms that dark spirits are basically loitering everywhere like sketchy teenagers. He follows the bad vibes and finds a creepy magic circle scratched into the floorboards. He plays it off as a school experiment to keep Ifa calm, but he leaves a few paper spies behind to keep an eye on things. Later, while Emmy is giving a boring speech, Seika notices that the nightmare circle he found is starting to glow. Right on cue, 3 demons crash the orientation party, ruining everyone's mood. The crowd panics, but Seika just sits back and watches to see what these monsters are actually after. The teachers are failing miserably at their jobs. One is about to get pancaked when Emmy jumps in and saves the day. Seika thinks these demons are way too sluggish to be the real threat. He uses his paper drones to hunt down the boss demon, who's actually running the show. He tells Ifa he has a thing to take care of and goes to deal with the manager of this monster invasion. He corners the demon and asks for a motive, but the guy isn't a talker and just sends his goons to finish Seika off. Seika deletes 2 goons instantly and banishes the third one to the Shadow Realm just for the drama of it. The head demon realizes he has to do this himself. He summons a bunch of swords and gets ready to fight. Seika tries a fire attack, but this demon can actually see invisible paper dolls and shuts him down with a counterspell. The demon teleports a blade right behind Seika's head. Seika dodges the first one, but the demon plays dirty and teleports it again for a sneak attack. The demon follows up with a fire blast while Seika is busy dodging. He teleports right behind the kid and lands a hit that looks like it takes Seika's arm off. The demon is actually impressed a human lasted this long, so he reveals the target is the legendary hero. He laughs and says Emmy is the hero, and he's going to go kill her as soon as he's done here. Seika is processing this when the demon sends a wave of swords that literally decapitates him, or so it seems. As the demon turns to leave, thinking he won, Seika pops back up, casually humming a tune about how strong he is. The demon tries to hit him again, but it's like he's trying to punch a ghost. Seika explains that raw power is for amateurs, real masters know how to cheat properly. The demon summons hundreds of blades for a final desperate move. Seika dances through the swords and uses water magic to turn the place into a swimming pool. The demon tries to drop on him from the sky, but Seika dodges and fries him with a lightning bolt. The demon tanks the hit and manages to pin Seika down, turning him into a human pincushion. But that was the plan. Seika triggers a self-destruct spell that blows a hole through the demon's confidence and health bar. Seika swaps places with a paper doll at the last second, so the doll took all the actual damage. The demon thinks he's clever and says Seika must be out of dolls by now. Seika just laughs and shows him he's got a whole warehouse of them ready to go. He decides to stop playing around and summons a top-tier monster that's been locked behind several cosmic doors. A massive dragon emerges, leaving the demon terrified because usually only the demon lord has that kind of street cred. The dragon snatches up the demon and takes him on a one-way trip to the sky before eating him. Seika tells the dragon to go back into its cage, but the beast thinks it can take him on. He uses his paper dolls to remind the dragon who's boss, and the creature tries to charge him. Seika just opens the portal and kicks it back in, realizing his spiritual pressure is still a bit wonky in this new body. He heads back to the school and finds out Emmy handled the smaller monsters all by herself. Watching the other students, he realizes being the strongest is just an invitation for the weak to drag you down. And that is exactly why he's trying to stay under the radar this time around. He figures if he makes Emmy the designated hero, she can take all the heat for being powerful. That way, nobody will be looking at him. He decides to befriend her so he can build her up as the world's shield. If she gets crushed, well, at least it isn't him. Too bad Emmy wants nothing to do with him. After months of failing to be one of the boys, he realizes he's socially awkward. One day, someone drops a bottle of toxic sludge on them. Seika teleports away instantly and waits for the inevitable oops. The resident nerd professor starts babbling about how his hand slipped during a levitation experiment. He explains it's a mix of monster blood and herbs. He claims he just lost his grip, but it sounds a little too convenient. Later, the teacher announces that Emmy and Ifa are going on a mandatory ritual trip to a creepy forest temple. They're supposed to offer their hearts there, which sounds way too much like a human sacrifice. Seika smells a trap and bullies Ifa into letting him take her spot on the trip. She isn't happy about it. The whole class thinks he's a massive jerk for stealing her opportunity, but he couldn't care less. He's got bigger fish to fry. He eventually apologizes to Ifa, explaining that he needs to keep an eye on Emmy before she gets herself killed. He claims he just values Emmy's strength, which makes Ifa feel like she's being replaced by a shiny new toy. Seika has to reassure her that she's still his number one, which puts a smile back on her face. The day of the ritual arrives, and Emmy is rightfully annoyed that Seika is following her around like a lost puppy. She asks if his maid wasn't enough for him, and if he's trying to add her to his collection. Before he can defend his honor, Emmy gets a sudden, blinding migraine. Seika finds another magic circle nearby that's causing the pain. He tries to help, but the trap triggers and teleports them into a dark dungeon. Lizard monsters swarm them immediately, but Emmy handles them like she's playing on easy mode. She's acting like a total hero, and Seika makes sure to give her a golf clap for her performance. When a monster tries to sneak up on her, Seika skewers it with a wooden stake before it can touch her. Emmy says being stuck here is basically a death sentence, but she's hopeful they can survive long enough for a rescue team to find their bodies. Seika uses paper dolls as breadcrumbs on the ceiling and summons some bee servants to scout the hallways. Another pack of monsters shows up, and Emmy charges in without a second thought. She's winning until one monster refuses to stay down and lands a lucky hit right on her chest. Emmy goes down and Seika stops pretending to be weak, shredding everything in his path with wooden spikes. He sees her losing consciousness and summons a giant centipede to finish the cleanup job. The bug makes quick work of the remaining trash. When Emmy wakes up, she finds out her wounds are magically gone thanks to Seika. Her head is still pounding, so Seika sets up a barrier that finally stops the noise. He tells her she's suffering from a curse, but Emmy is skeptical because she doesn't see any weird marks. She's never had any visible signs of dark magic on her skin. Seika hints that the mark might be somewhere she can't see, and she immediately calls him a pervert. Then, being a bit of a weirdo herself, she starts stripping so he can check her back for curse marks. He finds nothing, but points out there are plenty of other ways to ruin someone's day. He asks her for a lock of her hair to use as a focus. He ties it to a doll that will act as a lightning rod for the curse, so she can actually think straight. She starts grilling him about how he's doing all this non-magic stuff. But Seika just gives her a vague non-answer and keeps moving. Emmy starts talking about adult stuff and realizes Seika is completely oblivious to the fact that Ifa wants to be more than friends. Seika gets awkward and changes the subject to her backstory. Emmy says her parents are adventurers and she just loves a good fight. She doesn't care about pain or death, which apparently makes her the weird kid in her village. She's at the academy to get so strong that fighting becomes boring, so she can finally feel normal. Whatever that means for a girl who kills dragons. She asks if he thinks she's a freak, but he says everyone has a place, which actually makes her feel better. She thanks him for not being a judgmental prick for once. They go back to clearing the dungeon, mowing through mobs of monsters until they finally reach the boss's front door. Amy spots a giant serpentine nightmare and immediately decides that today is a great day to turn around and go home. But Seika convinces her they can win if they actually try some teamwork. She makes the questionable choice to trust him, and they charge into the boss room. Seika tries some wooden spikes, which do absolutely nothing, and the monster responds by spitting a lungful of acid. He sidesteps the goo while Amy tries a backstab, but her magic is basically just tickling the overgrown lizard. Seika finally finds an opening and jams a golden nail into the beast's mouth, telling Amy to blast it with a fireball. She follows orders for once, and the nail turns into a heat-seeking bomb that leaves the monster ready for the finishing blow. She's riding a high from the kill and gives Seika a hug, bragging about how they're basically the ultimate duo. He gives her a little pat on the head and tells her she's a big, strong girl. With the danger over, it's finally time to loot the place for anything shiny. Seika finds a mithril sword sticking out of a demon's hand and hands it to Amy because it matches her outfit. A magic ring pops out of the dirt next, and he decides to keep that one for himself as a souvenir. He claims being an adventurer is actually pretty fun and asks Amy for a second date in a dungeon, which she's totally down for. Shortly, they find the exit and head back to school to tell the faculty that their field trip was a disaster. The trapdoor magic had already vanished, leaving no paper trail, but Seika already knows exactly who to blame. He heads straight for Professor Nerd and calls him out for trying to curse the hero into an early grave. The teacher is stunned he got caught, and Seika lists off why it's obvious he's a demon fanboy. He confirms the professor was the inside man who let the demons in and set up the dungeon teleport. He tells the guy to stop pretending, but the teacher just laughs and says he's just a human who enjoys a good betrayal. Seika ironically calls him a genius for inventing a long-distance murder curse that leaves zero evidence for the cops to find. The professor is flattered for a second before remembering he has to kill Seika for knowing too much. Seika reveals that the curse is currently hitting a paper doll instead of the girl because the professor's targeting system is trash. While the guy is panicking, Seika summons a demon, covers himself in its blood, and hijacks the curse for himself. He whispers a little prayer to the basement of hell to send the bad vibes back to the sender. The curse hits the professor like a freight train, making him leak blood from basically everywhere. The man bleeds out on the floor while Seika mocks his research, telling him he's just a tiny bug compared to a real professional. Later, Seika gives Ifa the dungeon ring as a thanks for not dying gift to boost her spirit stats. She's thrilled, probably thinking it's an engagement ring or something. Emmy walks by and gives Seika the cold shoulder again, like they didn't just survive a murder pit together. She's being super nice to Ifa though, leaving Seika wondering where he messed up his social maneuvers. They eventually make it to sophomore year without anyone else trying to assassinate them for a few months. Seika has the whole school under surveillance, but things have been boring ever since he turned the professor into a corpse. Suddenly, the vice principal tells Seika and Ifa that the principal wants a word, which usually means someone is in trouble. He meets the principal and realizes she's a dwarf who's very sensitive about her height and race. She mentions Seika reminds her of his uncle who went here, which is news to him since his family tree is a mess. She cuts to the chase. He's being drafted into a combat tournament along with a random transfer student for some school spirit. Right then, a girl who looks like she grew up in a cave named Mabel walks in and introduces herself. The principal says there are 2 slots left, and she's giving one to the wild child and the other to Seika. Emmy is fuming that she wasn't picked despite being the valedictorian, but Seika thinks there's a hidden agenda at play here. Emmy is still pouting about being passed over for the big show. She assumes Mabel is just a Nepo baby, whose parents paid for her spot in the tournament to beef up her college apps. Emmy calls her a spoiled brat who's never seen a real fight, but Mabel shows up and throws the insult right back at her. Emmy gets in her face, but Mabel just tells her the reason she wasn't picked is simply because she's too weak to be useful. Emmy takes the bait and grabs some practice swords to settle this like civilized magical teenagers. Round 1 begins. Emmy lunges, but Mabel buffs her sword with dark magic and blocks the hit like it's a mosquito. She matches Emmy move for move before disarming her with a strike that probably strung quite a bit. Mabel starts trash talking. She calls Emmy a sheltered heroine, while Emmy cries foul because Mabel used magic in a sword fight. Mabel just tells her that the real world doesn't care about her fair play rules or her feelings. Before leaving, she tells Seika to quit now if he's just going to play around, unless he wants to leave in a stretcher. He gives her a fake smile and goes to help Emmy pick up what's left of her pride. Emmy decides she's tagging along to the tournament anyway, mostly to watch Mabel hopefully get wrecked. On the train, Emmy and Ifa are chatting away, while Mabel sits in the corner calling them both coddled infants. Seika is already over her edgy teen phase, but he decides to just stare out the window instead. They hit the capital and Seika is immediately sick from the ride because his new body is a letdown. He still drags himself to the arena to see which unlucky soul he has to fight first. He realizes that if he and Mabel keep winning, they'll meet in the finals, which will draw way too much attention. He sends the girls out to go shopping, while he spies on Mabel to figure out why the principal is so obsessed with her. Next day, Seika walks into the ring against a guy. He's an edgy swordsman who thinks mages are just squishy targets for him to poke holes in. Seika tells the guy he's not feeling great and wants to wrap this up fast, but the swordsman just charges like a bull. The guy stabs Seika, but he just swaps with a doll, appears behind the dude and blasts him out of the stadium. He wins the match in 3 seconds and goes home to take a nap. Yuki is worried he's being too flashy and attracting the wrong kind of fans. She thinks he's overworking himself with all the paper spies, but he says the intel is more important than his health. He meets up with the girls to watch the next fight between a mage and a guy in literal rags. The ragged guy, Kyle, uses a scary eye move to paralyze the mage before shanking him in the chest. Seika realizes Kyle is a pro assassin and sends a few paper drones to follow him to his hotel room. Mabel is watching from the wings, looking like she's about to have a panic attack over the next round. Seika's next opponent is a golem that looks like it was built in a garage. The owner brags that it's an anti-mage tank designed to ruin his whole career. She orders the bucket of bolts to attack. Seika summons a speedster demon that turns the golem into a pile of scrap metal before the lady can even finish her sentence. He heads back to his cheering squad, and Ifa is already worrying that Kyle might try to kill him next. He tells her he's fine, but Emmy starts making weird comments about his stamina that nobody asked for. The awkwardness is saved by the bell as Mabel's fight starts up, and they turn back to the arena to see the show. She's fighting an earth mage who thinks walls will save him, but Mabel just slices through his rocks like they're made of warm butter. Seika notices she's using gravity magic to make her throwing knives weigh as much as a small car. He knows you can't just learn that at a weekend seminar. He wonders just how much trauma she went through to get that strong. Mabel breaks the mage's stick and wins, and the hype man calls her the red-haired heroine. Seika is confused, but Emmy explains there's an old legend about a red-haired hero who used the same gear. The girl is basically a walking cosplay of a legendary savior. Seika finally connects the dots and spends the night catching a spy demon who was sending secret DMs. The spy tries to jump him, but Seika just tangles him up in some magical vines and calls it a day. The guy is shocked he got caught, and Seika tells him his little bird informants talk too much. Seika asks for the password, but the spy tells him he'll have to talk to his dead body. Seika says bet and summons a crazy-looking monkey to interrogate the guy's soul instead. No, it's not a troll from a comment section, it's a real demon. The monkey reads minds by literally pulling the words out of people's heads. The monkey spills the beans. The spy thinks Mabel is the hero because she fits the red hair and swords description. The demons are convinced she's the one they need to kill to win the war, and they're planning a hit. Seika has heard enough, so he lets the guy go, straight into the monkey's mouth for a snack. The monkey eats the guy. Then it has the nerve to turn around and try to read Seika's mind. The monkey says Seika actually feels a little bad for the guy he just fed to a demon. Seika hates being psychoanalyzed and threatens to turn the monkey into a rug if he doesn't shut up. The monkey realizes he messed up and sprints back into the shadow realm before he gets deleted. Yuki pops out of his hair and Seika apologizes for the scary death monkey show. He figures out the school is using Mabel as a human shield, so the real hero, Emmy, can stay safe and sound. He's fine with Mabel taking the heat, but he's not going to investigate her unless she becomes a problem for his vacation. The next day, it's just Seika, Mabel, and Kyle left in the brackets. There's also a guy who can use 4 elements, but Mabel tells Seika to forfeit now before he finds out this tournament is actually a bloodbath. Seika has zero interest in quitting, but Mabel tells him he better start listening if he enjoys having a pulse. He still gives her a hard pass and tells Red she needs to start being honest if she actually wants to make it to the finals. Right after that, the first semifinal kicks off between Kyle and some unnamed extra who's basically just there to lose. The extra tries to use light magic to block Kyle's creepy eyes and even throws a fireball for good measure. But Kyle just keeps walking forward like a Terminator, not even bothering to flinch at the heat. Seika realizes Kyle is abusing gravity magic to turn his body into an armored tank that shrugs off any physical damage. The extra summons a golem army, but Kyle uses shadow magic to wipe them out and pins the poor guy down for the finish. The judges blow the whistle just before things get messy, officially ending the match before a murder happens. That night, Seika tells Yuki he's planning to take a dive tomorrow just to keep people from snooping into his business. She shifts into her human form and tries to get romantic, but he shuts her down, claiming he only has eyes for older goths. Suddenly, his owl sees Mabel on the roof, and Seika grabs Yuki to dodge just as the ceiling comes crashing down. Seika points out that there are much less destructive ways to visit a guy's room at night. But she isn't there for a social call. She drags him out the window and starts throwing hands with some high-speed strikes that would kill a normal kid. She rips through his vine traps and lunges in for a killing blow on the lead. She only manages to stab a paper doll, realizing she's been fighting a decoy this whole time. Seika uses his teleport trick to pop up behind her like a ghost. She actually resists the spell, proving she's much more of a threat than he gave her credit for. He considers deleting her, but a drunk guy wanders into the fight, and Mabel uses the distraction to vanish. Yuki asks what the crazy girl's problem is, and Seika says they should probably just go ask her since she's nearby. He finds her pouting by a fountain. When she jumps, he tells her he's just there for a chat, not a rematch. He tells her if she gives him the full story, he might actually consider her offer to quit the tournament. Mabel admits she was trying to break his legs so he wouldn't show up to the fight tomorrow. She begs him one more time to forfeit because she really doesn't want his blood on her hands. He tells her he's playing the role of the hero's bodyguard and he needs to win to keep the spotlight off the real Emmy. He knows she's hiding something bigger, so Mabel finally breaks down and spills the dark truth. She says her entire purpose in this world is to die by Kyle's hand in public. It's a stunt to make the demons think the hero is dead. She and Kyle are orphans raised by a cult to be child assassins. The organization raises these kids in groups of 4 to build strong emotional bonds. It sounds nice until you find out what the graduation ceremony is. Once they hit puberty, they lobotomize the strongest kid with magic to turn them into an emotionless meat grinder. Kyle was the winner of her group and was forced to murder his best friends just to show off his new skills. He already killed 2 of them, and now the organization is using Mabel to hype up Kyle's reputation as a hero killer. They sent her here specifically to be his next high-profile victim, but she isn't going down without a fight. She actually plans on killing him first. She claims Kyle killed her brother, but Seika calls her out on that lie immediately. He deduces that Kyle is actually her brother, and she's trying to save him with a mercy killing. She's shocked he figured it out. She explains her brother's dying wish was for her to stop him if he ever lost his humanity. Seika changes his mind and decides he's going to win the semifinals so he can be the one to deal with Kyle. Mabel says she has to be the one to do it, but he points out she'll just end up dead. He tells her to go back to school and stay safe while he handles the heavy lifting for her. He promises her that her brother would want her to be happy, not a murderer, so he's going to fix both their problems. Mabel is stunned but warns him she won't hold back tomorrow. He just tells her he'll prove he's the strongest alive. The next day, Mabel pulls out a massive axe and tells Seika that his noble upbringing won't save him from her. The duel starts and she moves like a blur despite the heavy metal, putting Seika on his heels. He tries throwing some rocks, but she uses the axe's weight to pivot and dance around his attacks. She goes for a counter, but Seika blocks and tries to tie her up with vines, which she just rips through with raw power. He slaps a doll on her axe that makes it weigh as much as a mountain, pinning the weapon to the floor instantly. With her disarmed, he wraps her in high-tier vines and takes the win. The judges call it, and Seika is officially moving on to the finals. Mabel looks crushed, and Seika just tells her to let him handle the mess with Kyle. The final match begins, and it's Seika versus the edgy emo assassin himself. Seika asks if he's disappointed he isn't fighting his sister, and Kyle just gives a cold, dead-eyed response. The kid is clearly a shell of a person at this point. He says he'll kill Seika just because that's what his bosses told him to do. Seika hates the vibe and promises to give him his personality back by beating some sense into him. He drops a red mist to block the demonic eyes so he doesn't get paralyzed by the edgelord stare. Kyle walks right through the blue fireballs like they're a warm breeze and keeps coming. Seika tries the metal vines that stopped Mabel, but Kyle just deletes them with shadow magic. Kyle tries to shadow walk Seika, but he just hides behind a barrier and gets genuinely annoyed. He decides to stop playing and summons a 4-armed demon to show Kyle what a real monster looks like. Kyle attacks the demon, which just laughs and snaps Kyle's bones like dry twigs. Seika tells him that if he still had feelings, he'd be wetting himself and running for his life right now. He walks over to finish the job, but a nasty curse suddenly starts eating Kyle alive from the inside out. Seika tries to stop the black rot, but it's already done too much damage to the kid's organs. However, the pain actually brings Kyle back to his senses for a second. He asks Seika to tell Mabel he's sorry. Kyle dies, and Seika is absolutely livid that someone stole his kill with a cheap curse. His professional pride is hurt, so he prepares to use some forbidden arts to bring the boy back from the grave. Yuki tells him to cool it, because raising the dead is a great way to get 100 inquisitors at your door. He realizes she's right, so he uses a simpler reanimation spell to keep the body fresh. The mist clears, and Seika tells the crowd he evaporated Kyle, so there's no body to find. Very convenient. He wins the trophy, and later helps Mabel bury her brother in a peaceful spot where no cults can find him. She already knew he was cursed to self-destruct if he lost, so she had accepted the worst-case scenario. Seika tells her that Kyle's last words were an apology about a 4-leaf clover. Mabel breaks down, remembering how they fought over a hair clip right before he was taken away for the surgery. She cries for what feels like hours. When she asks what's next, he tells her she's coming back to school with him and he'll handle the paperwork. She agrees, and they head back to the girls, who are already waiting with the carriage. They already know the gist of the story and welcome the new edgy addition to the group. Emmy doesn't care about the tragic backstory and immediately challenges Mabel to a duel, using magic to win easily this time. She starts bragging about being the top of the class and recruits Mabel to be her personal punching bag for training. Back at the academy, the principal reveals she set the whole thing up because she knew Seika was the only one strong enough to actually save Mabel. She admits she basically bought Mabel from the assassins to save her life. The cult was going to dispose of her anyway after the mission. The principal just wanted the poor girl to have a semi-normal life for once. She knew Seika was a walking god and trusted him to get the job done without too many casualties. Mabel is safe for now, and she asks Seika to help her catch up on all the classes she missed. Later, Seika finds her in the lounge and notices her red hair dye is gone. She's finally done pretending to be a hero. Now she's just terrified of Seika's tutoring sessions, and the other girls are too busy laughing to help her. Spring break hits, and Seika's dad gives him a homework assignment: go play detective with a dragon nearby. Emmy wants to tag along for the vacation, but Seika reminds her she has a family to visit, and Mabel is busy hanging out with her new adoptive parents. Ifa looks like she's about to cry, so Seika finally caves and tells her she can come on the road trip. Suddenly, a guy named Cecilio, who's basically a prince with a massive ego, walks into the lunchroom. He starts insulting the country they're going to, calling it a total backwater. His elf servant tells him to watch his mouth, so he ignores the sass and introduces himself to Seika. He spots Ifa and immediately tries to recruit her into his harem of 200 wives. Smooth. Ifa is totally weirded out and tells him she's Seika's servant, so she isn't interested in the vacancy. Cecilio turns to Seika and tries to buy her like she's a used car or something. The servant steps in before things get physical and asks them to talk business in private. In the office, the prince explains that the dragon mission actually comes from his own kingdom. He says the dragon and the locals have been best friends for 100 years, so it's a diplomatic mission. But now, out of nowhere, the dragon has started acting like a complete jerk. Seika is curious why a beast that's been chill for decades suddenly chose violence. Cecilio spins a yarn about an ancient queen who played midwife to a dragon egg and helped the hatchling survive. The prince isn't sure if the story is legit, so he asks Seika to go fact-check while he goes dragon hunting later. On his way back to the dorm, the girls ambush Seika in the bushes to grill him about whether he's actually selling Ifa to Prince Ego. He promises he won't kick her out, but notes that if she actually likes the prince, he'll respect her right to make bad choices. The girls realize Seika is emotionally stunted because there is zero chance Ifa would ever leave him for a random royal. They eventually give up on explaining common sense to him and drop the subject entirely. The next day, Seika and Ifa hit the road with Cecilio's entourage. Ifa doubts a prince would really want a slave in his high-end harem, but Seika is convinced the guy is dead serious. Ifa admits she's a little flattered by the attention, and Seika experiences a rare, uncomfortable surge of jealousy. They reach the capital, where Cecilio brags about how peaceful it is, right before mentioning the dragon is currently wrecking the vibe. He points out the massive lizard flying overhead and terrorizing the locals, and Seika notes that the CGI budget was well spent. Suddenly, the dragon dives at them like a heat-seeking missile, giving Ifa a heart attack. Just then, a summoner calls in a lava tiger to play hero and scare the dragon off. The dragon bolts, but the tiger decides Ifa looks like a tasty snack and charges at her instead. Seika tries to trap it in crystal pillars, but the cat just melts through them like they're made of popsicles. Seika is about to delete the tiger from the server entirely. Suddenly, the owner, Zechti, collars the beast. Cecilio runs over to yell at the guy for letting his pets attack the guests. He gets chewed out for having zero control over his oversized house cat. Zechti just rolls his eyes and says they have much bigger problems than a little near-death experience. The dragon is getting more aggressive by the hour. Seika realizes Cecilio hired Zechti's mercenaries to put the beast down if they can't calm it. Seika points out that a lava tiger is way out of its league against a dragon and will only make it angrier. Zechti tells the kid to shut his mouth. He claims Seika doesn't know how the real world works. Seika retorts that Zechti should learn to leash his cat before talking and warns him to keep that thing out of his sight. Cecilio breaks up the bickering and sends the mercenary packing. Seika asks if the queen actually gave the green light for the kill, only to find out the prince is totally winging it. The prince tells Seika to mind his own business, so Seika turns his focus to Ifa, telling her it's time she learned to scrap. He tells her he isn't going to be her bodyguard forever. He insists she starts using her magic for something other than just looking pretty. Ifa starts crying at the tough love, and Seika shuts down the prince's attempts to intervene. He knows he's being a jerk, but he knows she'll die if she doesn't find her spine. In his past life, he watched a student get turned into dragon food because of a similar hesitation, and he isn't doing that again. The next day, Seika hits the books and finds out the dragon went through a similar midlife crisis about 150 years ago. Back then, a pair of dragons were nesting and went on a crime spree, stealing cows and scaring the locals to keep their eggs safe. The female dragon died shortly after the eggs hatched. Now there's just the single dad dragon left in the mountains. Ifa thinks it's impossible for the dragon to be nesting again, but Seika decides to climb the mountain to see for himself. Ifa is worried he'll get eaten, but he promises he's way too bitter to be tasty. That night, while he's working, Ifa knocks on the door because the prince sent a maid to summon her to his room for a late-night chat. She isn't interested in being a royal plaything and is terrified of being alone. Seika lets her crash in his bed, and as they lay there awkwardly back-to-back, Seika asks if she's actually considering the prince's offer. She gives a hard no. He tells her not to be shy about it. If she's only staying with him out of obligation, she should go get that crown. Ifa is devastated, thinking he's trying to get rid of her because she's a coward. She begs him not to dump her. Seika realizes he really sucks at talking to women. He explains that he just wants her to have a choice, even if losing her would leave him feeling pretty miserable and lonely. He insists that the final call is hers to make. Ifa says she'll think about it, but she cries herself to sleep over the whole ordeal. The next morning, Seika wakes up to find she's already bolted from the room. Yuki pops up to remind him he was a complete jerk to a girl who's been obsessed with him forever, but he denies it. Later, he finds Cecilio and chews him out for trying to slide into Ifa's DMs in the middle of the night. The prince apologizes but immediately offers to buy Ifa from him again. Persistent guy. Seika tells him she isn't an object, but if she wants to join the harem of her own free will, he won't stop her. It's her life, her choice, even if the prince is a total tool. Seika heads up the mountain to check on the dragon, warning the prince to keep his hands off the maid while he's gone. As he leaves, the elven servant Lies corners Ifa back at the palace. Lies notices Ifa can see spirits, which is a major red flag for her. She tells Ifa she has elven blood, and that being a prince's wife is way better than being a slave to a freak. She basically tells her Seika is a monster, and she should run while she still can. Lies asks if she's noticed that spirits avoid Seika like he's a walking toxic waste spill. Ifa sticks up for him, saying he's just a human and has been nothing but kind to her since they were kids. Lies keeps digging into Seika's mysterious background. She points out that nobody actually knows who his mother was. She suggests his mom was probably a demon and tells Ifa to stay far away from the danger zone. Ifa gets flustered, and Lies takes the chance to drag her off to show her how the other wives live. While Ifa is being brainwashed, Seika is riding a giant centipede up a mountain until he finds the dragon. The dragon is having none of it and tries to roast Seika, who just hides behind a barrier like a pro. The beast lunges, but Seika dodges and summons a sumo-sized demon to pin the lizard to the ground. He tosses an unbreakable net over the dragon and heads for the nest, where he finds a massive egg. Yuki is confused how a male dragon managed to lay an egg without a partner. Seika explains that these dragons are gender fluid and can switch things up whenever they feel like it. Seika decides to help the egg hatch, finally realizing the old queen story was actually a how-to guide. The dragon realizes he's actually helping and stops trying to kill him. She basically hires him as a temporary nanny for her unborn child. Seika sets up a fire circle to keep the egg warm while the dragon takes a well-deserved nap. He gets bored of babysitting and decides to head back to tell the prince the dragon is actually a new mom. The dragon isn't ready for him to leave yet and gives him a giant scaly hug. Meanwhile, Ifa sees that the prince's harem is basically just a giant, happy sorority house. Lies claims they're all training to be future leaders, and the prince is just looking for the perfect wife among them. Ifa is still unsure, so Lies drags her to see the prince, who is already waiting with a slave trader and some lawyers. The prince asks for an appraisal on Ifa and brings out a bag of cash to buy her freedom. Ifa starts panicking because things are getting way too official and creepy. The prince says he's going to pay Seika off so she doesn't have to be a slave anymore. Ifa says he can't just do that without Seika's permission, but Cecilio thinks everyone has a price. He threatens to change the laws of the entire country just to force the sale if he has to. She insists she doesn't want to leave because Seika actually gives her the freedom to say no to people like him. The prince's advisors say she's too dumb to know what's good for her and they should just force the issue. He calls in the guards. Ifa tries to call the spirits, but Lies uses an anti-magic zone to shut her down. Lies says it's for her own good and uses wind magic to slice Ifa's thumb for a blood signature. She's about to force the thumbprint onto the contract to seal the deal. Ifa screams for Seika, and suddenly the massive dragon smashes through the roof like an angry landlord. Lies' anti-magic zone is crushed instantly. Seika walks in and tells everyone to stay calm because he and the dragon are best buds now. Ifa is so relieved she almost faints, and when Seika tells her to hop on the dragon's back, she doesn't hesitate. She tells the prince and Lies that she's staying with Seika forever and they can keep their money. They fly back to the nest. Ifa thanks him for the save, though Seika is still clueless about the thumb-slicing incident. Back at the nest, Zechti's tiger jumps out and tries to trap Seika in crystal pillars again. Seika calls the mercenary out, and the whole squad emerges from the shadows. Zechti reveals he was always going to kill the dragon and steal the egg. He just used the prince as a legal cover. He tells Seika he's dead meat and sends the tiger in for the kill. Before Seika can move, Ifa blasts the cat away with a literal fire hose of spirit water. She's done being the victim. Seika is impressed by her new backbone, and angry Zechti orders everyone to attack at once. Seika drops some white fire that vaporizes the tiger instantly, just like he warned him he would. The mercenaries are terrified, and the dragon decides to join the party and starts snacking. Seika tangles them in vines. Zechti tries one last desperate move to blow the whole mountain up. But Ifa just torches his spellbook, turning his final boss move into a pile of ash. Seika gives Ifa a gold star for finding her backbone so fast. Afterward, he drags the mercenaries back to the prince to snitch on their little crime spree. Cecilio orders the arrests, and then begs Seika for the tea on how he actually tamed a legendary dragon. Seika explains the dragon was just an expectant mother and only chilled out because he played babysitter for the egg. This makes the prince realize the old legend about the dragon whisperer queen wasn't just a bedtime story. The only reason these dragons haven't burned the country down is that they saw a human queen as their surrogate mom. Seika suggests the prince keep the tradition alive by hatching the egg, but Cecilio isn't interested in being a nanny. He'd rather have the clout that comes with a dragon kill, thinking it'll boost his political standing. He actually has the audacity to ask Seika to do the dirty work for him. Seika gives him a hard no. In response, Cecilio has him arrested on some bogus charges of causing the dragon's tantrum in the first place. Seika was willing to play along with the drama until the prince tried to slide over to Ifa. The guy tries to convince her to ditch her monster master and join his royal fan club instead. That's the final straw. Seika snaps and tells the prince his brain clearly isn't getting enough oxygen. He calls him an incompetent moron and a creep who can't even handle basic management, let alone a kingdom. He makes it crystal clear that he isn't handing Ifa over to a budget royal like him. The elven servant lies, laughs and tells the guards to stand down, giving Ifa the floor to finally speak her mind. Ifa tells Cecilio she's going back to school with Seika. Even if she were a free woman, she'd still choose the monster over him. The rejected prince sulks, and Lies apologizes for the mess. Seika forgives them because they aren't worth the effort of a grudge. Most people would have just cleared the room. Lies pulls Ifa aside for a little girl talk session after the dust settles. She asks point blank if Ifa is actually in love with Seika. Ifa gets all flustered, but Lies says she could have saved everyone some time by admitting it earlier. She even heals Ifa's finger as a parting gift. Lies plays nice and tells Ifa she hopes things work out with her terrifyingly powerful master. Back at the house, Seika puts 2 and 2 together and realizes Ifa has elven blood, which explains the spirit magic. He's secretly thrilled she dumped the loser prince and asks her what her type is. Ifa describes him to a T, but Seika is a romantic brick wall and concludes that her ideal man must be extremely rare. Later, Seika meets the girls at the gym and mentions that his dad wants to play host to his school friends. He invites them over for spring break, and they're all too happy to get a free vacation out of it. However, once he's alone, Seika lets out a massive sigh. He hates going home because it isn't his dad calling the shots, but some high-ranking political shark he can't ignore. A few days later, they arrive at the mansion. Luft is there to be the polite host, but Gray ruins the mood by charging in and screaming for a rematch. Seika asks if life in the army is treating him well, and Gray admits he's actually thriving, which is a weird way of saying thanks. Still, Gray is salty about his last public humiliation and demands they settle the score once and for all. Emmy confirms that this is the bully brother and steps up to handle Gray so Seika doesn't have to waste his time. Seika is more than happy to watch from the sidelines. He tells Gray he has to get through the girl before he gets a shot at the title. Gray accepts but tells Emmy to use a real blade while he sticks to a wooden one to be fair. Seika plays referee and bans magic, mostly because he knows Gray would just end up setting himself on fire again. The fight starts and Emmy immediately overwhelms him. Gray loses his footing, leaving him wide open for a quick finish. But he starts chanting a fake spell that psychs her out long enough for him to disarm her. She calls him a cheater, but Gray just laughs and says she shouldn't have fallen for a bluff. With Emmy out of the way, Gray starts eyeing Seika again, ready to finally get his revenge. Suddenly, a princess appears and starts cheering for her holy knight like he's a prize-winning puppy. Gray is mortified to see Princess Fiona out of her room and acting like his personal cheerleader. He asks what she's doing out, and she just giggles and says she came to watch him get embarrassed. Gray loses all his fighting spirit instantly. Seika is impressed that a teenage girl managed to housebreak his wild brother. He introduces Fiona as the Holy Princess, which leaves the other girls wondering what they walked into. Inside, Seika tells Yuki that Fiona is a big deal because she inherited a mix of royal blood and priestess voodoo. She's basically a magical heavy hitter with the pedigree to match. Over tea, Emmy whispers to Seika, trying to figure out why a princess is crashing their spring break. Fiona admits she's there to meet the hero of the era, which makes Emmy turn beet red. She also gives Seika a lot of attention, asking the group to escort her back to the capital for safety. Seika agrees, and once Fiona leaves the room, the girls immediately demand to know why he's on a first-name basis with royalty. At dinner, Fiona starts dropping hints that the food might be spiked. She uses the tension to trick everyone into revealing their deepest secrets. While they chat, Seika's adoptive dad remembers how his servant, Ifa's father, was terrified of his daughter serving an illegitimate creep. The guy was convinced Seika was bad news, but Robert always had a feeling his nephew was a good kid at heart. He stood by Seika even when the rumors were at their worst. Later, Yuki does a mean impression of Fiona in Seika's room, clearly showing she isn't a fan of the new girl. Seika knows the type. He mentions that his wife from his previous life had the same manipulative streak. Yuki wants the gossip, but Emmy interrupts by wandering in and flopping onto his bed like she owns the place. She starts asking about his post-grad plans, wondering if he's going to be a career student or actually do something. He reminds her they promised to go adventuring together. He's planning to go pro as an adventurer just to keep his word. Emmy is genuinely happy to hear that and says she's holding him to it. Once she's gone, Yuki reminds him that he was only using Emmy as a human shield for his own power. He was just using her as bait, and he claims he hasn't forgotten the mission. The next day, Seika plays tour guide for Fiona around the city. With Emmy and Gray as the hired muscle, Fiona starts holding Seika's hand and pretending they're on a romantic date. She's laying the charm on thick, trying to get in his good graces. She tries to set up a classic "save me" moment at a construction site by standing right under some failing equipment. Gray and Emmy jump in immediately, smashing the falling logs with magic before anyone gets flat. They ask Seika if he was even paying attention, and he just says he knew they had it covered. Why waste the effort? Fiona is annoyed that Seika didn't play along, so he buys her a ribbon to stop the pouting. He even creates a magic mirror so she can admire her new accessory. The princess is easily bought and seems happy with the shiny toy. Later, Seika finds Gray training and asks why a princess chose a meathead like him to be her knight. Gray says she's a shark in a sundress. She only picked him for the political influence his name brings. She calls her guards holy knights, just to look more legitimate to the public. Seika thinks she seems normal enough, but Gray warns him that she's a total viper. He reveals she used to be locked in her room like a prisoner. Now she's a top-tier candidate for the throne because she can see the future. Seika is stunned. Gray adds that her mom also saw the future and predicted the birth of the hero and the demon lord. Based on her obsession with Emmy, Gray is certain the princess has already confirmed who the hero is. He tells Seika to keep his distance, or he might end up as a pawn in her grand game. The next day, Seika starts teleporting away every time Fiona gets within talking distance. He's taking his brother's advice to heart and avoiding the royal headache at all costs. But Emmy catches him and tells him to go talk to the girl because she looks like a kicked puppy when he ignores her. Seika finds her on the roof playing chess. She claims to be the best and offers him a match with a handicap. She only uses her pawns and king. She also makes a bet that the winner gets one favor the loser can't refuse. They talk shop while playing. Fiona says true power comes from the common people, not just the nobles. She's building a brand so the masses will support her when she makes her move for the throne. She thinks Seika is the perfect tool for her plan. He calls her out on her manipulative worldview. Fiona says she just wants to use her gift to help people and needs him as her right-hand man. Seika doesn't reveal his cards, but he agrees to the favor. She destroys him at chess and smiles, already planning her request. The next day, they head for the capital. Seika is immediately hit with his usual motion sickness, making him a grump. He uses his invisible servants to scout for bandits, while Gray tries to keep the mood light. Right on cue, someone attacks the conv and blows up one of the supply wagons. Seika jumps onto the carriage roof and sees they're completely surrounded by a small army of bandits. The archers open fire, but he just pops a magnetic shield and watches the arrows bounce off like plastic toys. The bandit leader is losing it because his mages can't touch him. Gray takes charge and tells the knights to start the cleanup. Fiona shows up and asks Seika to catch the bandits alive. He complies by tying them up with vines like a bunch of holiday hams. The girls eventually catch up to Seika. Emmy is visibly pouting because she didn't get to punch anyone this time around. She points out that it's pretty suspicious for a group of low-level bandits to jump such a heavily armed squad. Fiona pulls Seika into her carriage to say thanks. She admits she needed the bandits alive as material evidence for an assassination attempt. She'd already seen this coming in a vision, which is why she brought spare carriages specifically to haul the assassins to jail. Seika warns her that keeping them around is just asking for trouble, but she's confident they won't try anything stupid while they're in custody. They're currently waiting for backup that is absolutely never showing up to save them. The group finally hits the capital. Fiona gets weirdly emotional while saying her goodbyes to Seika and his little entourage. Before she leaves, she tells him to remember she's always on his side. Seika, as usual, is completely oblivious to her meaning. Back at the academy, Seika somehow gets roped into becoming the student council president. Just what he needed, more paperwork. He takes the job, but Yuki wonders if becoming a campus celebrity is the best way to keep a low profile. Seika admits he's tired of acting like a coward just because he died once. He's decided to actually enjoy his school life for a change. He's done hiding in the shadows. After graduation, he's going to live it up as a high-ranking adventurer. As for the growing list of powerful enemies, he plans to delete them quietly so nobody bothers his vacation time. Unfortunately, trouble is already knocking. A squad of high-level demons has parked themselves outside the city with one goal: kill the hero. The demon captain senses a massive power level in the city and assumes it's the hero he's looking for. His plan is simple: herd all the students into the town square and start a massacre until the hero shows up. He's betting that the hero won't be able to resist jumping in to save her doomed classmates. The leader promises his team they'll kill the target and make it home for dinner. His squad actually believes him. Delusional, right? The hit squad includes the captain, a monster tamer, and 2 other weirdos who look like they're looking for a fight. The demons teleport into town, but find the whole place draped in a thick, creepy red fog. One demon spots 2 kids in the park and tries to roast them with fire magic, but realizes he didn't actually hit anything. The tamer and his gothic partner wander off to find some actual humans to kill, flirting while they look for victims. They brag about being the strongest in their village until they met their boss and realized they were just big fish in a small pond. They've been training hard, and now they're feeling cocky enough to think they can actually take down the legendary hero. They spot a target nearby, and the rabbit boy sends his shadow wolves to fetch them a snack. The wolves come back empty-handed, leaving their master very confused about what just happened to his pets. In another part of town, the muscular demon runs into Mabel, who is more than happy to give him a real challenge. She thinks he's an assassin from her old cult and swings her giant axe. He's surprisingly strong and keeps her busy with a barrage of heavy hits. Poor girl. She tries to use her gravity tricks, but the demon manages to disarm her. She doesn't panic and just stabs him with a concealed knife instead. The demon claims he can't be stopped by a little toothpick and moves in to finish her off. Mabel flips the script with shadow magic and traps him right where she wants him. She demands his surrender, but he breaks free, boasting that he's basically immune to every magical element she's got. He lunges at Mabel. He lands a massive blow, only to find out he just punched another one of Seika's paper decoys. The demon captain is waiting at the center of campus when the rest of his bruised and confused team finally shows up. They all have the same story. Every human they attacked turned into a piece of paper at the last second. They realize they're being toyed with, and the captain decides it's time to get the hell out of there. Suddenly, Seika strolls out, casually reciting some poetry he wrote back in his emo phase. The captain uses his magic eyes to scan Seika and nearly has a heart attack when he sees the power level. Seika informs them that everyone they fought today was a fake, except for the girl with the giant axe. They've been fighting puppets this entire time. The muscle-bound demon still thinks he's the main character, but even he can tell Seika is in a completely different league. He tries to start a fight, but gets his head removed before he can even finish his sentence. Seika was just testing out a curse on him. He notes that the demon was surprisingly fragile for someone so buff. The gothic girl gets furious and charges at Seika, ignoring her captain's frantic orders to stay back. She tries her stone-cold glare. She uses her demon eye to try and petrify him, but it fails. Seika decides to show her how a real death stare looks. He summons a massive white snake. Even with its eyes sewn shut, the snake's presence literally stops the girl's heart. She's dead before she hits the ground. The rabbit boy loses it and tries to attack the snake, but his hits are basically just tickling the scales. He thinks he can use his tamer skills to win the snake over, but he's really just serving himself up as a snack. He's confident he's in control until the snake decides it's lunchtime and swallows him whole in one bite. Seika finds the tamer's failed attempt to command his pet absolutely hilarious. The demon captain realizes they never had a prayer. He is absolutely paralyzed by Seika's overwhelming dark energy. The captain tells his last remaining teammate to run for his life, while he stays behind to die. He wants the survivor to warn the demon realm that there is a literal god in human skin walking around the academy. The teammate looks at Seika through his magic eyes and realizes the truth. Seika is actually the next demon lord. The demons can't wrap their heads around what they're seeing. But then Seika makes it worse by saying he won't let them touch the hero. The demons realize the ultimate king is on the human team. Seika drops a tsunami of lava on them. The captain tries to block it just long enough for his friend to bolt into the woods. He buys enough time to let his buddy escape, paying for it with a slow, painful death. But Seika isn't a fan of loose ends. The wounded demon only makes it to a tree before a delayed reaction cut opens up his chest, finishing him off. He dies wondering why the Lord of Demons is currently doing the humans' laundry. Back at the school, Seika stabs a practice dummy to end the spell and clears away the red fog. Mabel runs up, panicked, asking where the big red monster went before he hurts anyone else. She's worried he's still out there hunting students. Seika realizes his keep away spell didn't work on Mabel because she's too stubborn to be mind-controlled. He assures her the demon was only after the hero and that the problem has been permanently deleted. He asks her to keep this little incident between them so he doesn't have to explain the bodies. The welcoming party for the freshers kicks off, and Seika has to put on his president hat to give a boring speech. She has to redo her bit because the demon invasion kind of ruined the original schedule. He chats with Emmy about her part in the ceremony, making sure everything is ready. Suddenly, a group of knights busts in, looking for a fight and looking for Emmy. The captain accuses her of murdering a demon emissary who visited the school. He places her under arrest. Emmy swears she's never even seen a demon, but they haul her off anyway, ignoring her logic. Seika gets that sinking feeling that the government is up to something shady in the dark. Ifa and Mabel try to stop the arrest, but Seika tells them to stand down and let the knights have their way for now. He tells the girls Emmy is innocent and she'll be back before they know it. He's trying to stay calm. The knights don't like his tone, but their captain tells them to just focus on the girl and move out. Seika marches to the principal's office and tells her the demons were actually there and he did the cleanup. She knows Seika was behind the mystery fog and asks if he's there to yell at her for letting Emmy get kidnapped. Seika says he knows the Empire is trying to assassinate the hero and he wants a real explanation. The dwarf principal tells him imperial politics are a dumpster fire and Emmy's arrest is part of a bigger game. There are too many layers of corruption to explain over tea. She promises she's pulling strings with the nobles to get the girl released, so he should just sit tight. Seika has zero faith that a dwarf's political lobbying is going to save his friend from an executioner. He notes that Emmy will be a skeleton by the time the paperwork clears. He decides to handle it the old-fashioned way. Ifa and Mabel are waiting outside, ready to mount a rescue mission, but Seika plays it cool. He tells them to calm down and let the school handle the red tape. He says he's just going to wait patiently. That was a blatant lie. As soon as the sun goes down, he summons his dragon for a little late-night flight. The dragon is still being a brat, and Seika has to put some work in just to keep it from crashing. Yuki suggests he just lets the girl go if he really wants that peaceful, boring life he keeps talking about. She warns him that breaking her out means declaring war on the most powerful people in the Empire. It's a direct repeat of the mistake that got him killed in his previous life. Seika doesn't care. He still sees Emmy as his beloved student, and he isn't about to let her get hurt on his watch. He declares he's just going to leave 0 witnesses. If there's nobody alive to tell the story, his secret is safe. Yuki sees the look in his eyes and decides to stop arguing. She knows he's past the point of no return. She can't change his mind when he's in God mode. He hops on the dragon and orders it to fly full speed toward Emmy's prison. Meanwhile, Emmy is rotting in a cell, wondering if she's ever going to see the sun again. She misses the gang and is starting to lose hope of a rescue. While she's crying over her memories, the heavy iron door opens for a mysterious visitor. At the same time, Seika touches down in the city where she's being held. He releases his paper dolls and turns them into a mouse-sized spy network to find her cell. He locks onto her location and prepares to crash the castle through the roof. He shoves the dragon back into the shadow realm, but a guard catches him red-handed. The guy blows his whistle to wake up every soldier in a 5-mile radius. Apparently, they were expecting a break-in and mobilize with surprising speed. Archers start raining arrows on Seika, so he pops a magnetic shield to play no touchy. The guards are being annoying, so he just drops a couple of boulders on their sniper towers. He smashes through the front doors like an angry landlord to find even more security waiting. They demand to know who he is and why he's currently remodeling their castle. Seika just tells them to clear out if they value their health and dental plan. The guards take it personally and open fire, forcing him to do some tactical maneuvering. He gets creative and uses his white flame spell to turn the entire squad into a campfire. Talk about a quick way to win an argument. Then Seika pulls out a magic scythe that starts mowing down soldiers like it's harvest season. The remaining guys are terrified, but they still charge him with that "I get paid minimum wage" energy. He roasts them with blue fire and leaves a small friend to finish the cleanup while he moves on. After a few minutes of total chaos, Seika finally makes it to Emmy's depressing little cell. She looks at him like he just grew a second head. Seika deletes the prison door and tells her it's time to check out of this 1-star hotel. Emmy starts worrying about the legal fees, reminding him that domestic terrorism is bad for his reputation. He points out she's literally on death row, but she insists she'll be fine and released any day now. She tells him to just go back to class and wait for her, but Seika isn't buying the optimism. He explains that she's a legendary hero destined to die because weak people fear her power level. He notes that history loves to kill off anyone who makes the status quo feel insecure. He begs her to bolt with him, but then senses a guest arriving and throws a fireball at the hallway. The intruder just swats the fire away, and Seika realizes he's about to fight his own brother. He asks if they're doing this now, but Fiona pops up to tell everyone to just chill out. Seika isn't shocked, figured she'd already seen this outcome while playing psychic chess earlier. He demands a full explanation, or he's going to start treating them like the other guards. Fiona says she just wants a civilized chat because she knows he's basically a walking nuke. She promises to drop all the secrets to prove she's cool, hoping he'll take her side after the reveal. Seika asks why they're killing the hero of the world, and Fiona starts a boring history lesson. Back when humans and demons first started beefing, they had no idea how to handle real power. But when the first hero showed up, she basically soloed the entire enemy army and won the war. Back then, the hero was a celebrity icon for peace, and the Demon King was just the bad guy. Nowadays, both armies are strong enough to fight their own battles, making the hero a useless relic. Seika says that's a trash reason to kill a friend, but Fiona says a hero's existence triggers wars. Nobody wants a full-scale war right now, including the demons, so they're just trying to remove the spark. Fiona claims Emmy will never reach her full potential because Seika keeps playing her personal bodyguard. Since he bails her out of every mess, she'll never have the character growth needed to be strong. She knows he's only helping because he needs her as a tool, and his current plan is failing. He asks if she expects him to just let her die for global peace, but she says that's not the plan. She swears she's trying to get her freed legally, but Seika needs to disappear so she can do her job. She promises to cover for him and erase the evidence of his little castle-crashing spree so he isn't wanted. Seika laughs, noting that none of these guys could actually arrest him if they tried. He's pretty much untouchable in this world. Fiona plays her trump card and reminds him of the bet he lost during their chess match. He's stuck, and even Emmy tells him to just listen to the lady with the crown for once. But Seika tells her to pipe down while the adults are talking business. He tells Fiona he has zero reasons to believe her, and she actually looks a bit insulted by that. She gives up the act and tells him to just take the girl and bolt before the guards wake up. She points them toward a getaway carriage and tells them to head for a free city outside Imperial control. Seika takes the win, and Emmy hands her prison blanket back to Fiona as a weirdly polite thank you. She tells him the princess and Greg actually visited her in her cell to promise a rescue. They said she'd be out soon, so she wasn't as worried as he was. They say their goodbyes, and Seika starts feeling a little bad about trashing the place. He tells Fiona he's sorry for being a jerk about the bet, and decides to fix the mess he made. He walks back to the courtyard where he just finished a murder spree, and pulls out every paper doll he had hidden in his back pocket. The dolls swarm the sky and wrap the whole fortress in a massive glowing bubble. The girls are speechless as the spell literally undoes death, reviving the soldiers and fixing the castle walls. Fiona is furious, yelling at him for making her paperwork and cover-up story even more impossible. She was going to blame a random monster, but now she has a fortress full of confused survivors. There's no hiding it anymore, but she just has to deal with it because he's too strong. She bids him a final farewell, knowing their paths are definitely going to cross again in the future. Seika and Emmy hop in the carriage, and she immediately starts grilling him about his secret powers. She's got a million questions, but he's too busy trying to figure out how to drive a horse without a manual. Back at the castle, a demon hiding in the shadows starts chatting with Fiona about their mysterious guest. He asks who that kid really was, since he was the scariest thing the demon had ever sensed. Fiona says he's the Lord of Demons, leaving the shadow guy confused as to why the big boss is saving heroes. She just smiles and says it's because he's actually a decent guy deep down. She knows he'll eventually choose to save everyone, even if it leads to his own destruction. With that, the two outcasts drive off into the sunset toward their new life in the free city. They know they can't show their faces back at school since they're technically wanted criminals now. Seika wonders how to find Ife and Mabel, but Emmy tells him to stop worrying so much. Since they got kicked out of school early, They might as well start their epic adventure right now. Turns out Fiona already told the other girls the coast was clear and they were safe. They're all stoked to be reunited and start a new chapter together. When they hit the city, Mabel and Aoife are already there waiting for them, having ditched the academy. Aoife tackles Seika with a hug, and he realizes this crazy second life is really just beginning for him. And that wraps up the wild story of the strongest exorcist in another world. What a ride. Hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown as much as I did. Solid show. Total banger. Fingers crossed for a second season drop soon. Sending love to all you beautiful people out there. Catch you later and see you in the next one. Peace out.